Hello and welcome to the Owl's Nest. So today is going to be part one of a 20-part series leading up to the first match of the 2020 Overwatch League season, where we're going to be breaking down teams' prospects, looking at recent changes that they made in the offseason, looking at their upcoming schedule, and today we're going to start with the Houston Outlaws. So as I mentioned, this team preview is going to focus on the Houston Outlaws, the changes they made at coaching, at their players, and their schedule, and we're going to predict their wins and losses and where we overall expect them to be. So starting out, the Houston Outlaws will be playing in the South Division next year of the Atlantic Conference, and they are joined with the Atlanta Reign, the Florida Mayhem, the Philadelphia Fusion, and the Washington Justice. So of those 5 teams, I think Houston has a shot at second or third. I believe Philadelphia will be the number 1 team. As we broke down a few videos ago, their roster is crazy good for next year, but I think Houston and Atlanta will compete for 2 and 3. Florida is making improvements. They recently just signed some members of Runaway, but I don't think that'll be enough to really help them this season, but it's a good start. And the Washington's kind of a mixed bag for me. They made a lot of acquisitions this offseason, but I have no idea how they'll synergize, and we'll wait till we get to their team preview. But I think Houston at second or third in their division makes a lot of sense, and as we break down their schedule, that'll make sense too. So as for additions, the most notable addition for the Houston Outlaws is that head coach they signed Harsha. Harsha was initially with the San Francisco Shock and then with the Vancouver Titans, and now he has finally taken a head coaching job for Houston. I think this is a good pickup. Harsha has been a key member of the community and he's been fantastic in Vancouver, and I think he'll only improve Houston. Houston definitely had a disappointing season 2, and I think Harsha could very much help turn that around. Next up, they signed Hydration, who was formerly of the Los Angeles Gladiators. He would play alongside Surefour. He's definitely more of a projectile DPS, but I think that's something that Houston could use an upgrade at. Jake hasn't really been performing as well, and Junkrat's not super meta, so I think having Hydration there to play projectile for the Houston Outlaws will be great for them next season. As well as they signed Blase. Blase has some very similar hero pools to Hydration, but maybe in a certain meta or a new hero comes out and one of them adopts it faster, it's nice to have that flexibility. As well as Hydration and Blase both have tanking experience. I wouldn't expect them to ever play it for Houston considering Muma and Meko are there, but if they ever need to, I think it's a nice flexibility to have, though I doubt it will ever occur. And as I've just mentioned, Meko was signed, formerly of the New York Excelsior, which is a great upgrade from off-tank for the Houston Outlaws. They were previously rolling with Coolmat, and Coolmat was good, but I think Meko is definitely an upgrade for them. And if Muma is playing to his potential, Muma and Meko could be a great tanking group. As well as they signed Rappel, who was a bench warmer support for the Vancouver Titans, and whenever he played he was great, and if Harsha is coming over from Vancouver and bringing Rappel with him, that's probably a good sign. I bet Harsha feels like this player has a lot of potential, and Houston needed a support upgrade, so that'll be great for them too. So that's how I see the roster acquisitions and their division standings, but why don't we go ahead and jump into their schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and change the view here to my iPad, where I have the Houston Outlaws 2020 schedule, and we're just going to break down game by game how I expect them to perform, and then we can count all up at the end for an overall record, and what this means for the team, and some variability for error. So first up, they play the Florida Mayhem in Philadelphia, and I think this will go down as a win for the Houston Outlaws. I like Florida next year, but I don't think they have as much experience as Houston, as well as I just think that Houston has the stronger lineup right now. Next up is the Washington Justice. I think this will also be a win for Houston. Corey and Stratus are a great DPS duo, but their tank line kind of worries me with Roar at main tank or with Eli Vogt and Lulshish. I don't know what the answer is going to be there, or if they're planning on signing another player at this point. We haven't heard anything yet, so I think that could be a win for Houston as well. So a good start at 2-0. And next up is going to be the Boston Uprising. I think this will also be a win for Houston. Boston is doing a very similar strategy for Season 3 that they did for Season 2, where they're selling most of their players and keeping a few. I think Fusions will still be a star there, but I don't know if they have enough talent to beat the Outlaws next year. Now they play New York Excelsior. I think this will be a loss for Houston, bringing them to 3-1 on the season thus far. But still, starting 3 for 4 is pretty good for Houston. I just think New York plays another caliber of Overwatch that Houston can't quite reach yet. Though they did steal their off tank, I don't think Houston has enough talent to beat New York despite the off tank switch. Next up is the London Spitfire. I do think Houston takes this. London is definitely going to be downgraded with Profit and Gesture and almost all of their players leaving the team. We don't know a whole lot about who London's roster is going to be next year, but I'm assuming it'll be mostly contenders players or something of the sort. And I don't think that London is in a position to play very well in 2020. So I'm going to give that win to the Houston Outlaws. Next up is the Toronto Defiant, and this one's tricky because Toronto really upgraded their roster with a lot of former Los Angeles Valiant players, and they acquired Surefour, they upgraded their tank line. I think Toronto will be good. I don't know if I see them beating Houston yet. I think Houston, once again, has that pre-existing synergies and I think the additions of Hydration and Meko, I don't think the acquisitions Toronto made overvalue the acquisitions Houston made, so I'm going to go ahead and give this one to Houston. Paris Internal, I'm also going to give this one to Houston. I think Houston just has the stronger lineup. And then they play them again. Wow, sorry, I'm just realizing this. Houston has a month off. That's crazy. Anyway, I think after a month, I will still give the edge to the Houston Outlaws against the Paris Eternal, which would make their record at this point 7-1, which is really good for Houston. However, they do play the New York Excelsior again, and I expect that to be a loss. As I previously mentioned, I think New York is just a different tier of an Overwatch team than what Houston is at this point. Who knows, the meta may change and Houston might be spectacular at it and New York might suck, but I think if you just look at the teams on face value, I think New York is the stronger team. However, they do play Boston again. I think that'll be a win for the Outlaws. And then Toronto, I'm actually going to say they lose this one just to call it a scratch because I think Toronto and Houston are so closely matched this season that I bet they go 1-1 in their series. And then London comes up again, and I think that will be a win for Houston. Now moving on to the May matches. Florida comes back. I still think Houston will take this. And then we have Atlanta. I'm going to say they lose to Atlanta the first time. I think Atlanta had a really strong end of the season, and a lot of the pieces are still there for them, as well as they signed some contenders players who might have a decent role in the team. I think Atlanta will take the first match. Then we move on to Seoul. I think Seoul will also defeat Houston. Profit and Gesture on that team, and I just do not see Houston beating that. I think the upgrades that the Seoul Dynasty have made this year are crazy. I think they are a title contender, and I do not think Houston has a shot. Next up is going to be the Hangzhou Spark. I'm going to give this one to the Spark. The Spark were really strong last year, keeping most of their roster. Actually, I don't think they've made many changes this offseason. And I think Houston will still struggle to beat them, but that will be a good matchup to watch. I'm excited for that. And then the Chengdu Hunters. I'm going to give this one to the Outlaws. Chengdu plays a very unique style of Overwatch, and they're always playing off meta, but I think if Houston's players are playing to their full potential, I think they have Chengdu beat if they can just find out what gimmick they're going to use and beat it. Now moving on to June, we've got the Guangzhou Charge. I'm going to say Houston loses this one. Guangzhou also ended last season super strong, and I can't imagine they're making a whole lot of changes. We know that they upgraded their support line for being Shu and Neptuno. Nero is now 18. I think Guangzhou is going to be a really strong team next year as well. I don't think Houston quite gets them. Next up is Shanghai. Shanghai, I'm also going to say Houston loses to. Shanghai had a great stage 3 of last year, obviously, and they have really star DPS players. They also just signed Fleta, which I think people are kind of sleeping on how big of an acquisition that is. Fleta was a hit scan god when he was great, and I think a change of scenery might be good for him. And I'm not sure if Houston gets that. That'll be a close one as well, though. Philadelphia, I'm going to say Philly wins that. I have talked on end about how great Philly's new roster is, and I think if Meko is a top 3 off tank, I think Fury might be 1 or 2. And I just think that Philly's roster moves and their upgrades are a little bit stronger than the Outlaws. That'll be a great match, though. I'm excited to see that. And then Washington, I think... Oh, whoops. I just realized I made that a win. I meant to say loss. And then I think Washington, Houston will win. So after kind of a rough May and June looking at this schedule, let's go into July. Vancouver, I do not see Houston winning. Vancouver is crazy good. If Houston wins, barring any drastic meta changes, that'll be a crazy upset. Next, we have a really interesting match against Dallas. This is the Battle for Texas that'll be in Dallas next year. And I think I'm going to give this one to Houston. I like the changes Dallas has made at DPS and at tank, but I just don't know if they're enough. Plus, Dallas has had some organizational dysfunction recently. I'm going to give that one to Houston. That'll be a big win if they can take the Battle for Texas and Dallas. Next up is the Shock. I don't think the Outlaws will beat the Shock. I'm sorry. I like the Outlaws, but the Shock are the best team in the Overwatch League right now, and I don't think Houston holds a candle to them. The Gladiators, I also think that'll be a loss with their upgrades at tank and just the momentum they've had the past 2 seasons. I think that the Gladiators will take that one, though I think that'll be a close one too. And then the Valiant, I do think the Outlaws will win that, considering just the Valiant aren't signing super expensive or strong players next year, so they're definitely underdogs on the season, and Houston is not that. Houston is a pre-existing team with some star free agents now. I think we're going to give that one to the Valiant, or to the Outlaws, excuse me. And then finally, their last 2 matchups at their homestand in August is going to be the Fusion. I'm going to give the Outlaws the win here because it's at their homestand and they're closely matched. I think the Outlaws get the edge. And based off their schedule thus far, if we're looking at it, they're pretty close to 500. And I think with playoffs on the line, they play very well in Houston against Philadelphia. And then finally against the Atlanta Reign, I'm going to give them a win here as well. They have the home field advantage, and I think they're close in caliber to them. So I think that'll be the matchup there. So that's going to do it for predicting the schedule. Now let's just overview everything I just said, and let's finish this up. So after breaking down the roster for the Outlaws, I see them finishing at 17-11, which is going to put them 6 games over 500, and I think they have a great shot at the playoffs with that record. Overall, I still think that Philly will be the best team in their division, but I think that the Outlaws will give them a run for their money, and I think there's a chance we could see them in the playoffs. I think the acquisitions they made are very strong this year, and I can't wait to see what they do. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think, and also let me know what team you want me to cover next. I'm going to get to all 20, but I kind of want to base it off of what my viewers want, as well as rosters that are close to being finished. The GM for the Outlaws said that they have no plans on any roster moves at this time, so I feel like it's pretty safe to make a prediction video for the Outlaws, but some of the other teams I'm not quite sure on yet. So yeah, that's why I started with the Outlaws. I think maybe Philadelphia will be next because we also know their official roster, but then after that we'll figure it out. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys all have a great day.